Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. So Deontay Wilder gets his first win in 3 fights, scoring a 7th round TKO over Tyrrell Herndon in Wichita, Kansas. Despite that, the general consensus among boxing fans seems to be that this was a terrible performance by Deontay Wilder. The majority seem to think he looked totally washed up, and based off this performance needs to retire ASAP. But what do I think? Well, I want to start off with some positives, because yes, in my view, there are some positives to take from Wilder's performance here. The first one being that Wilder looked a lot better physically in this fight than he did against Zhang or Parker. And what I mean by that is, he seemed a lot more stable on his feet. Against Parker and Zhang, he looked very unstable, very wobbly before he'd even been hit with a shot. There was something not right about his biomechanics. Now, perhaps he's more stable with a bit of extra muscle on him. But then again, you go back and look at the first Ortiz fight, he was very light in that one too, but looked far more stable than, as I say, he did in his last couple of bouts against Parker and Zhang. So whatever the reason for his instability, he was a lot more solid physically in this fight. And he's been around this weight many times before, by the way. But the first positive is he looked more physically stable. He was a lot more confident in this fight than he was in his last two. And obviously a lot of that has got to do with the level of opposition. Herndon is a very, very limited fighter. And that allowed Wilder to fight more confidently because he could see that Herndon wasn't confident. Do you know what I mean? Wilder also threw a lot more punches. Again, you have to imagine it's largely down to the level of opposition, but still, he let his hands go aplenty in this fight, which we didn't see in his previous two, and he was just far more aggressive and positive. And that's the reason that you take fights like this when you're coming off a devastating knockout defeat, to get you in there against the guy who can allow you to feel like a predator again, rather than feel like a wildebeest being hunted by a lion. And from a fight like this, the idea is you build psychological momentum. It's not about necessarily sharpening your skills, although that's part of it as well. It's more so about building confidence, what I just called psychological momentum. So it served that purpose. So those are the positives. The negatives with this fight would be that, first of all, Deontay Wilder at 39 years of age does not have the same speed that he used to have. Again, he's fought at this weight, 225 pounds, many times in the past, even when he was champion. And his shots and his movements were far quicker than this. So the old Deontay speed is a thing of the past, it would seem. He's a lot slower now. And that brings me on to the second negative, which is that his right hand connected flush on Herndon on multiple occasions in this fight, and it did not have the effect that it had on many previous opponents. Bear in mind, Herndon is a guy who's been stopped 4 times previously. And all of those stoppage defeats were far earlier than the Wilder defeat. So he was stopped in 2 by Richard Torres back in 2023, stopped in the first by a guy called Corey Barlow, who himself was 2-4-2 at the time. He was stopped by F.A. Jagba in 1 round back in 2017. And he was also stopped by a guy called Shamarian Snyder back in 2017. The other defeat on his record, which was not a stoppage, was a DQ loss to Brandon Glanton, the cruiserweight who Chris Smith just beat. So Deontay Wilder really labored to stop a guy who was blasted out early by several other heavyweights. They say the power is the last thing to go, but it eventually goes. I'm not saying Deontay's power is completely gone, but what I can say is Deontay is a guy who fights off emotion. He's a very emotional character and he channels that emotion into his punches. That's where the snap, the ferocity, and the velocity of his shots in part came from, along with his athleticism. Wilder doesn't have the same fire in his belly now as he did years ago. And that's a natural thing that happens as you age. Your testosterone levels start to decline. And they may have declined to such an extent with Deontay Wilder now that it started to affect his punching power. Because he used to be a very high testosterone, high energy fighter. See, some punchers don't rely as much on emotion to generate the power. They're more, as they call it, heavy-handed. Some of these guys barely look like they're putting much effort into the shot, and it still knocks you out. George Foreman being a great example, particularly in his second career when he came back in his late 30s. Gennady Golovkin will be another one. Part of this is down to technique, of course, but also part of it is down to, bone density, natural biomechanics. It allows these guys to have quote-unquote heavy hands. Deontay doesn't have that kind of power. He's not a heavy-handed guy. He's an explosive guy. His power is predicated on velocity to a large extent. And when the velocity starts to diminish, the power starts to go with it. I'm not saying Deontay can't summon an almighty right hand that could still flatten a horse or even an elephant 2 or 3 times in a fight. Perhaps he can, but he can't summon as many of them as he used to in yesteryear. He just can't. He doesn't have enough fire in him to do so anymore. And that's a big problem for Deontay Wilder because that fire is part of what made him so dangerous and effective. He was a very instinctive puncher. Like a shark, he would smell blood and it'd be on you. These days, he's a shell of himself. I was calling for him to retire after the Zhang fight. Do I still feel this way after the Herndon fight? Well, like I say, he did show some positives here. Looked more solid and stable, was more aggressive, let his hands go a lot more confident, but how much of this is down to the level of opposition? And how much of it is down to him being in a better place generally in his life? If he were to go back in against the Zheli Zhang, who's coming off a stoppage defeat himself now against Caballel, let's say in a rematch, would Wilder fight any differently against Zhang? What I will say is, I don't think Wilder's performance against Herndon here was as bad as the majority of people are making it out to be. Don't get it twisted, it wasn't a great performance, but there were positives there. Some. And I say that because I remember when Lennox Lewis came back from his first defeat, his knockout loss to Oliver McCall, he fought a totally out-of-shape journeyman called Lionel Butler. Lewis was gun-shy in that fight. He didn't show anywhere near as much aggression as Wilder did against Herndon. To be fair, Lionel Butler was a much bigger puncher than Herndon, but still, Butler was totally out of shape. Totally out of shape. And only had maybe a round or two in him where he actually tried. Yet Lewis still labored, I think it was 5 or 6 rounds to get rid of him. Very, very gun-shy Lennox Lewis in that fight. But of course, Lewis at that time was maybe only 30 years of age. Deontay Wilder is 39. So he doesn't have as much time as Lewis did back then to get it together, to make another run at the title. I'm going to advise the same for Deontay Wilder as I have been advising for Anthony Joshua, which is that, yes, he should retire, but if he insists on continuing, he should target his contemporaries, in my opinion. People such as Anthony Joshua. And funny enough, Deontay doesn't seem particularly keen on that fight right now. He did an interview during the week where he was asked directly about the AJ fight and he said, "It doesn't excite me anymore." But I think that's who Wilder should be going for. Not just because of the fact it's a payday, and it's certainly not the payday it used to be, but it's still somewhat of a payday. But also the fact because I see it as being a lot more winnable than if he were to fight Daniel Dubois or Alexander Usyk. I've seen some people after Wilder's performance here saying AJ would destroy Wilder in a couple of rounds. If they get in the ring, we'll see, but I personally think it would be competitive. If Wilder is more washed up than AJ, I don't think it's by a great deal, to be honest. So I think that's the direction Wilder should go if he wants to continue boxing, but maybe he'll look at a Dave Allen next instead. And I've seen some people say that based off this performance against Herndon, Allen would destroy Deontay Wilder. I tend to disagree. I think the Allen fight is very winnable for Wilder. Herndon boxed very negatively. For the majority of the fight, he was just trying to survive, moving his head a lot, moving his feet a lot, slipping and sliding, not trying to engage much. I could count on one hand the number of occasions that Tyrrell Herndon really tried to engage in the fight, and probably have fingers to spare. And when a guy doesn't want to engage you and he's purely focused on survival, it's more difficult to get him out of there than you realize, especially when you are not the most proficient technical fighter, which Deontay Wilder never has been. The vast majority of Wilder's knockouts have come from somebody engaging him. When somebody's in survival mode like Herndon, Wilder has to do a breakdown job. And breakdown jobs involve feinting, going to the body, trying to trick your opponent out of position. And these are not things that Wilder is particularly great at, never has been. Dave Allen will be looking to engage. And that would give Deontay Wilder far more opportunities to land his big shots. He actually dropped Herndon in a second round in this fight with, it wasn't even a left hook. It was supposed to be a left hook, but it was the wrist part of Wilder's glove that landed on Herndon's head. Herndon went down really from being off balance. It wasn't any kind of concussive effect from the blow, but he threw that punch quite a lot in this fight, Deontay Wilder, the left hook. And while it hasn't been a devastating punch in and of itself, for the most part, although he landed a nice one on Tyson Fury in the 12th round of their first fight, which set up the right hand, it serves to do exactly that. Lay the table for the right hand that follows. And so, yeah, I think Dave Allen, if Wilder doesn't want to go straight into an AJ fight, might be a decent next step. Although Allen, in his most recent interview, seems to be leaning more towards the Jamie TKV fight rather than taking on Deontay Wilder. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I would favor Deontay Wilder over Dave Allen. Oh yes! As terrible as some people think he looked in this fight, I would still favor him to beat Dave Allen. I think Wilder still has enough. He pops his jab out there when you get close. It ties you up and leans on you. Let's go with the right hander plenty. I'm not saying Dave Allen's got no chance. I give him maybe a 40% chance, which is decent. But I still see Wilder winning the fight, maybe on points. But is that the right fight for Deontay Wilder if he wants to continue building psychological momentum, building his confidence? A points victory over Dave Allen, is that really the way to go? Because Dave Allen can take a shot, we all know that. He's very tough. Wouldn't it be better for Wilder to take on somebody who he can really hurt? These things are all up for discussion. But those are my overall impressions of Deontay Wilder's performance against Herndon. For me, it was a mixed bag. I don't think it was all negative. I think him against Joshua was a 50-50, to be honest. And him against Dave Allen, I'd say 60-40 in Wilder's favor. But give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Maybe you've got a totally different take. Whatever the case may be, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. Are you surrounded by mindless bots in human form who adhere to the norm and blindly conform? Who swallow all the mainstream BS and actually ridicule you for questioning things? Do you wish you had more free-thinking individuals in your life to network and converse with? Well, look no further. We're right here. Come and join the Brotherhood of Reason on Patreon. You'll gain access to my weekly topical content where we take deep dives on an endless variety of subjects, as well as my vast back catalogue of podcasts, videos, interviews, movie decodings, and my Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You'll also get to talk and network with myself and hundreds of other people in our members chat. You can enjoy all this via the Patreon app or on desktop and download all my podcasts in high quality MP3. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store, or simply visit patreon.com on a web browser. Then head on over to my page and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. All the links are in the description box below. And just a quick money-saving tip for Apple users. If you purchase your Patreon subscription on the desktop site or on Android, then you'll avoid the ridiculous 30% fee that Apple charges for purchases made on the iOS app. So if you're on iPhone or iPad, save yourself some money by buying your subscription on the actual Patreon website or on Android because it's a lot cheaper. Once you've made that initial purchase, you can then use the Patreon app on your iPhone or iPad thereafter to access and enjoy your content as normal.